You've just joined the Prepper Broadcasting Network, where we promote self-reliance and independence. The views and opinions expressed are strictly those of the host or their guests. Visit us in the interactive chat room at PrepperBroadcasting.com.
Tonight's broadcast brought to you in part by Joe and Amy Alton, authors of the #1 Amazon bestseller, The Doom and Bloom Survival Medicine Handbook. See their articles in Backwoods Home, Survivalist, Self-Reliance Illustrated, and Survival Quarterly magazines. Visit Joe and Amy's website at www.doomandbloom.net.
Good evening and welcome to Preparing for Life Storms with BexarPrepper. Today is Tuesday, January 1st, 2013, and it's my pleasure to welcome you in tonight. We are on air from 8 to 9 p.m. Central Time every Tuesday on American Preppers Radio, powered by PrepperBroadcasting.com. We broadcast 11 different hosts 7 days a week. So please check out the host tab for more information on shows and times. You can also listen to all previous shows under the host archive and on the homepage. You just find the previous week's archive shows. Okay, that screwed that one up. If you'd like to join us in the chat room, come on over to PrepperBroadcasting.com and click on the Listen and Chat at the top of the page, which will then take you to the chat room. Create your name or just accept the default name and come on in. You'll always be in for a treat with some lively chat and interesting conversation. Tomorrow night, Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central Time, Goat Hollow and the Surreal News. The facts about where our world is heading from the headline. Also, don't forget to tune in to the other side of her prepper's path now on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. She always gives such great information, and I love to listen to her. We also have a new show, Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, on Sunday at 6 p.m. It's going to be a replay of their regular show, and it should be a lot of interesting information. So now a word from our sponsors.
This broadcast is brought to you in part by Ozark Mountain Preparedness, providing top-quality instructional courses for people who desire to pursue a self-reliant lifestyle, whether in the wilds or right at home. Course topics include wilderness and urban survival, fur trapping, bushcraft, primitive skills, long-term wilderness living, land navigation, GPS, home disaster preparation, outdoor cooking, food procurement and storage, foraging wild edibles, and many others. Visit Ozark Mountain Preparedness at www.ozarkmountainpreparedness.com.
This broadcast also brought to you in part by Emergency Essentials. Power outage, hurricanes, flash floods, earthquakes, tornadoes, solar flares, job loss, zombies, Armageddon. It doesn't matter what you're preparing for, Emergency Essentials will help. From tips for preparedness to food and water storage to ready-to-go emergency kits. Visit their website at beprepared.com and let Emergency Essentials help you prepare for, well, anything.
I hope everyone had a refreshing start to the new year. It's great to see you all in here tonight, and thank you for joining us. So tonight we're going to be talking about what to do when the man comes knocking. G-Man will be posting some links in here tonight as we go through this. And for those of you not in the chat room, he'll be adding them to the show archive for you to check out. I highly recommend that you check them so you can be better informed about the rights in your state. First, I want to say I'm not an attorney, so take what I give you and make a sound decision for yourself. Or please contact an attorney to see what your rights are in your state. Through my research, I have found that our First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments are kind of intact, or at least equal with most of the states. There are some glaring differences in a couple of states that might not be so glaring anymore, but I will get into that in a little while. So, what do our First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendments say? The First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Remember, pay attention to the ors and the ands when you're reading our amendments. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Our Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy for life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. These three amendments are key to what and how we should respond when confronted by federal or government agencies. So what's really important in these amendments for us? One, the right to work for change. The First Amendment to the Constitution protects the rights of groups or individuals who advocate, petition, and assemble to accomplish changes in laws, government practices, and even the form of government political intelligence gathering is not supposed to interfere with these rights. Not supposed to. The right to be free from unreasonable search and seizures without a warrant. No government agent is allowed to search your home or office or any other place that is yours in private. That does not mean that they won't. The right to remain silent. The Fifth Amendment of the Constitution provides that every person has a right to remain silent in the face of questions posed by any police officer or government agent. So, first, I have the freedom to operate my camera or my mouth to create change. However, that does not give me the right to be belligerent. If you choose to go that route, then you have to be prepared for what the consequences might be. You hear a knock at the door, you open it, and there are two individuals in suits, which means it's either missionaries or the FBI. Well, today it's the FBI. You open your door and you ask, how can I help you? That was your first mistake. You should never open your door and stay in the doorway. I also don't agree with leaving your chain on and talking to them through the door. As you do this, they are free to peer into your home and might interpret your cleaning your gun or processing herbs as a reasonable suspicion to enter your home. I believe there are two other valid choices. The first, of course, as most of you have already figured out, is to step out your door and close it behind you. The second is to just ignore it. You have every right not to answer. If you have not summoned them, you are under no obligation to answer your door. If they have a search warrant, they'll come in through the door. But that is a choice I would make. I won't be giving them assistance to enter my home, even with a search warrant. The only difference to me would be that the door remained intact, but the rest of my home would still be destroyed. Politeness aside, the wisest policy is to never let agents inside. I think that's very important for everyone to consider. They are trained investigators and will make it difficult for you to refuse to talk. Once inside your home, just by looking around, they can easily gather information about your lifestyle, your organization, your reading habits, and your prepping habits. The FBI does not have authority to make anyone answer questions, to permit a search without a warrant, or to otherwise cooperate with an investigation. Agents are usually lawyers, and they are always trained as investigators. They have learned the powers of persuasion, the ability to make a person feel scared, guilty, impolite for refusing their request for information. So remember, they have no legal authority to force people to do anything unless they have obtained an arrest or search warrant. Even when agents do have search warrants, you still don't have to answer their questions. Your statement that you wish to speak to the FBI only in the presence of a lawyer, even if it accomplishes nothing else, should put an end to the agent's question. Then, when you get a chance, you call the local office of the National Lawyers Guild. A law enforcement official can only obtain your name and address if he or she has reasonable suspicion to believe that you have committed or about to commit a crime. Thus, if law enforcement knocks on your door or FBI knocks on your door, you do not have to identify yourself. You can simply say, "I don't want to talk to you," or "You'll have to speak to my lawyer," and then close the door. The FBI agent, unlike a police officer, does not have jurisdiction to investigate violations of state statutes. Remember, it's very important that if you do talk to them, you get their name, the agency, and telephone number of any investigator, and that way you have information to give your attorney. All right. You do not have to let police agents in your home or office unless they have produced a valid search warrant. What is a search warrant? A search warrant is a written court order that allows the police to conduct a specified search. Interfering with a warrantless search probably will not stop it, and you might get arrested, but you should say, "I do not consent to a search." And a criminal justice lawyer or the National Lawyers Guild can help you if that should happen. You should be aware that a roommate or a guest can legally consent to a search of your home if the police believe that person has the authority to give consent. Your employer can also consent to a search of your workplace without permission. So, now, this is really important. The Supreme Court recently ruled that answering law enforcement questions may be taken as a waiver of your right to remain silent. So it's important that you assert your right and maintain them. Only a judge can order you to answer questions. There is one exception. In some states, they have what's called stop and identify statutes, and they require you to provide identity information or your name if you have been detained on reasonable suspicion that you have committed a crime. We are supposed to be protected against government access to your mail or other written communications, telephone, and other conversations. Unfortunately, it is difficult to detect interference with writings and conversations, and modern technology has made it difficult to detect electronic surveillance on a telephone line or other listening device, or even be able to detect cameras that are recording us wherever we go. Also, common physical surveillance, such as agents following you in a car or on foot, and informers carrying tape recorders. It's getting harder and harder for us on a daily basis to be able to protect our rights. So it's important to know how to handle these things. The Fourth Amendment applies to a search only if a person has a legitimate expectation of privacy in the place or thing searched. If not, the Fourth Amendment offers no protection because they are, by definition, no privacy issues. Courts use a two-part test fashioned by the U.S. Supreme Court to determine at the time of the search a defendant had a legitimate expectation of privacy in the place or thing searched. Did the person actually expect some degree of privacy? Is the person's expectation objectively reasonable? Is this one that society is willing to recognize? For example, a person who uses a public restroom expects not to be spied upon. We have an expectation of privacy, and most people, including judges and juries, would consider that expectation to be reasonable. Therefore, the installation of a hidden video camera by the police in a public restroom will be considered a search. That doesn't mean they won't put one there, but it would be subject to the Fourth Amendment's requirement of reasonableness. On the other hand, when the police look for and find a weapon on the front seat of your car, it's not considered a search under the Fourth Amendment because it's very unlikely that the person would think the front seat of the car is private. The expectation of privacy is unlikely. And even if the person did, society wouldn't be willing to extend that protection of privacy to that particular location. A good example of how this works comes from the U.S. Supreme Court case in which the court held that a bus passenger had a legitimate expectation of privacy in an opaque carry-on bag positioned in a luggage rack above the passenger's head, and that the physical probing by the police of the bag's exterior for evidence of contraband constituted a search, subject to the Fourth Amendment limitations, Bond versus U.S. 529 and U.S. 344. All right, before I go through a couple of more scenarios here, let me go ahead and give you our call-in number. It's 347-202-0228. Looks like we've got some good information traveling back and forth in the chat room, and so if you're listening in and want to be a part, come on to the home page and click the listen and chat and join our chat. All right, so let's go over some scenarios. If you're stopped on the street, you have a right to ask if you're free to go. If the police say you're not under arrest but are not free to go, then you are being detained. Being detained does not necessarily mean you will be arrested. When this happens, the police can pat down the outside of your clothing if they have reason to suspect you might be armed and dangerous. If they pat down your clothes and they find a joint in your pocket, that was an illegal search. They make, and if they search any more than this, say clearly, I do not consent to a search. They may keep searching anyways, but you don't need to answer any questions if you are detained or even if you're arrested. Very important to answer as little as possible. Excuse me a moment. Sorry, my throat is getting parched. All right. If you're stopped in a car, upon request, show them your license, registration, and proof of insurance. You do not have to consent to a search, but in some cases your car can be searched without your consent if the police have probable cause. Okay, if you think you're being watched or followed, and I think some of us had this issue at a location at one point where we thought someone was there that shouldn't have been there. And in the future, I will proceed to do this. If you think you're being watched or followed by the police or FBI, you have the right to approach suspected agents in a non-angry way, in public, and ask what they are doing. Of course, you may want to bring someone with you as a witness. Even if the person you suspect does not answer, that person at least knows that you know you are being watched. It is not illegal for law enforcement officers to engage in surveillance in public places. But if you think government agents might be following,
Well, I'm on. This is G-Man. Deb, are you okay?
I'm mute. I'm sorry, G-Man. I was on mute.
Glad to have you back.
Sorry, folks. I hit my mute so I could cough, and then I thought I unmuted it, and apparently I didn't, and I was yakking away. So sorry, folks. We had a weather change down here, and my allergies have kicked into high gear, and so I'm doing a little bit of coughing tonight. So I will try to do better with the mute button. Please forgive me, guys. All right, so I think I probably stopped at the point where if you're being treated badly by the police or the FBI, remember the officer's badge number, name, or other identifying information. You have a right to ask the officer for this information. Write down everything as soon as you can. Try to find witnesses and their names and phone numbers. If you're injured, take pictures of the injuries as soon as you can and call a lawyer. Thank you, everybody, for your concern. I'm really not sick. It's just allergies, and it makes me cough. So apologize for that. Okay, so let's get into some interesting things that have happened recently. And those of you that live in Massachusetts and Illinois, you'll be really happy about this. A recent Freedom of Information Act request on behalf of Livermore Action Group, an anti-nuclear organization, revealed that the Navy, the U.S. Marshal Service, and the Marine Corps all sent agents to the group's public meetings and kept newspaper reports of such meetings. Most chilling was the revelation that the Federal Emergency Management and federal agency charged with implementing martial law in the event of a nuclear war was also watching the Livermore group. So, if you think your group is being watched, do a request of information and see what comes up. You just never know. If you suspect surveillance, you should not hesitate to ask the suspected agents' names and inquire about their business. You can say something like, "Officer, I'm not interfering. I'm asserting my First Amendment rights. You're being documented and recorded off-site." Now, G-Man's got some links. I'm going to have him put, if an agent knocks federal investigators and your rights into the chat room. And these will be on the archive when the show is reposted. Okay, so how can you tell if an officer is asking for ID has reasonable suspicion? Well, police need reasonable suspicion to detain you. So one way to tell if they have reasonable suspicion is to determine if you're free to go. You can do this by saying, "Officer, are you detaining me, or am I free to go?" That is a statement you should learn and learn well. If he tells you that you can't videotape there, and if G-Man would drop in the videotaping and the video recording laws into the chat room, if you feel like you're standing at a reasonable distance, you can say something like, "Officer, I have the right to be here. I'm filming for documentation purposes and not interfering with your work. It's then up to you to decide how far back you're willing to stand to avoid arrest." If the officer starts to really get upset and says, "Shut it off or I'll arrest you," there are two ways this can go. You are risking arrest in order to test the boundaries of free speech. So if police say, "I'll arrest you," believe them. You may comply by saying something like, "Okay, officer, but I'm turning the camera off under protest." I don't think I would do that. And I would recommend that you go to the second link, video recording laws by state, to determine what rights you have, and then watch the videotaping link and read about that to make sure that that is something that would comply for you. If you'd like to call into the show, the phone number is 347-202-0228. Okay. Remember that the camera is still recording when you're doing this. Don't turn it off. Just take it down. So keep calm and act like you're being judged by a jury of millions of your YouTube peers, because one day you might be. And another thing that you should do, if you are recording an officer, don't hold the camera up to your face, between your face and his. That will do nothing but escalate the situation. Move the camera down and point it upward. Very important. There is no reason to escalate the situation. And if someone held a camera in my face, I would be upset. So just move it down and angle it up. And if you're not sure at what angle that should be, then practice with it. And also, you should put an application on your phone. I have Quick, QIK, and I have it set on my home page of my phone so that at a moment's notice, I can execute it, and it will record and upload to YouTube Live. You can also use YouTube Live, but that you have to have set up in advance. This, you can have it set up, and it'll automatically do it. So you should think about those things if you're going to be doing videos like I do and have the opportunity to record things that you see going on, or if you think you're going to be at a point where your privacy or you're going to have the FBI knocking on your door. Sometimes it's hard to tell what is going to cause them to knock on your door. Is it our gardens? And, if we let this information that's happening to Baker's Green Acres continue, then if that passes, then what's to say it's not going to hit our gardens next? Is food storage eventually going to be considered hoarding? So we should all learn these things now so that we're not afraid when the situation hits us. And thank you, everybody, for fixing that name of that program, QIK, not QIC. I appreciate it very much. All right. Looks like G-Man has a question. Come on in, G-Man.
Hi, thanks, Bear. What a hot topic. This is great. My question is why not carry your own tape recorder? And if you were to get pulled over by a police officer, and this I do know, you do have to make them aware. You cannot hide it and record. but why not carry that tape recorder with you if you were to get pulled over, or if they were to come to your house, record it yourself. Have you done any research on that part of it?
Yes, and I'm going to be getting to that because there are laws that apply to not everybody. Like in California, you're absolutely right. You cannot hide your tape recorder and record it. It is a dual consent, and if it's in public and it's a police officer, that is considered dual consent. In Texas, though, it only requires one party to consent. And as the person recording, I am the consenter. So it's very important to know what the laws are in your state. But, yeah, and phones are perfect for that. I mean, you can record the conversation, you can record the video, and every phone usually, or at least most of the phones nowadays, have a recorder on them. But know your laws first. Please use those links that G-Man put into the chat room to make sure you check out your state's laws. And we're going to get into that here in a minute, of the interesting things that have happened recently with those laws on each state. But that's a great idea, G-Man. Okay, I think he disappeared. Okay, so now in states that allow recording with consent of just one party to the conversation, you can tape your own interactions with officers without violating wiretap statutes since you are one of the parties, and we just said that. In situations where you're an observer but not part of the conversation, or in states where all parties to a conversation must consent to a taping, the legality of taping applies only when there is a reasonable expectation of privacy. But that is not the case in all the states. Until recently, it's kind of changed. I'll go into that here in a minute. No state court has held that police officers performing their job in public have a reasonable expectation of privacy. The state of Illinois makes the recording illegal regardless of whether there is an expectation of privacy, but the ACLU of Illinois is challenging that statute. And we recently got an update, and I think that's a little further down because there's a little more big information to give you. All right, so another piece of information was that the U.S. Court of Appeals in Boston ruled that 3 Boston police officers are not immune from liability for arresting a man who, believing the officers were using excessive force to arrest a young man in the Boston Common, recorded the scene on his cell phone. The officer arrested the spectator, Simon Glick. You guys have probably heard of him. Confiscated his cell phone and a computer flash drive and charged him with a violation of the Massachusetts wiretap statute, which requires consent of all parties to record a conversation. The state Supreme Court has interpreted the statute to criminalize only secret recordings made without such consent. Because the officers admitted that Glick used his cell phone openly and in plain view to obtain the video and audio recording, the Boston Municipal Court dismissed the wiretap charge against him. Glick filed a civil rights action against the officers and the city for alleged violations of his First and Fourth Amendment rights. The officer moved to dismiss the complaint, claiming they were entitled to qualified immunity on the charges because it is not well settled that Glick had the constitutional right to record the officers. The lower court denied the motion, stating that the federal appellate court, with jurisdiction over federal trial courts in Massachusetts, this First Amendment right publicly to record the activities of police officers and on public business is established. The Reporter Committee for the Freedom of Press joined the friend of the court brief in support, but they were declined to even be considered in the brief. The appellate court affirmed the denial, allowing Glick to pursue his claims against the officers. 12 states, and I'm going to name them now because it's important you know: California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Washington require the consent of all parties for you to record a conversation. But don't despair if you live in these states. All but 2, Massachusetts and Illinois, have an expectation of privacy provision. To their all-party laws, the courts have ruled does not apply to on-duty police or anyone in public. In other words, it's technically legal in those 48 states to openly record on-duty police. There is a current update. The First Circuit Court of Appeals covering Massachusetts declared the state's ban on recording police to be unconstitutional. And in May, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals covering Illinois also declared the state's recording ban unconstitutional, ordering authorities to stop enforcing it. Yay, let's get Obama. In November, the Supreme Court of the United States rejected Illinois' petition to appeal the Seventh Circuit Court's ruling, which is great news for those living in Massachusetts or Illinois. So as long as you're in public and as long as they can see you recording, you're safe. All right, looks like we have Endeavoring Mama in the queue. Come on in, Endeavoring Mama.
Hello.
Well, hello. How are you this evening?
Pretty good. I have a quick question, I hope.
Go for it.
All right. I was watching a documentary. It's a wonderful documentary called Farmageddon on Netflix. And during one portion, they showed where a family was basically held captive by agents, and their children were there. And it reminded me of an incident that happened in California where we had someone at the house, and we were all minors, and the police came and knocked at the door. And, of course, us not knowing anything, we opened the door to them despite the fact that they had no warrant. And I remember asking them, can I call my parent? And I've been wondering, since now I'm a parent and I'm an adult now and I have my own children, what rights do our kids have? Are they allowed to call their parents? Can they fight back at all? I mean, if the police were to come and get into our home somehow without us being there, what rights do they have as citizens?
You know, they pretty much have the same rights we do. If they open the door and let them in, then they've allowed them in. And the only thing they can do is not talk to them and ask for an attorney. That's about all they can do. And,
okay, yeah.
The key is don't let them in the first place. Teach your children not to open the door. If they don't know who's there, don't open the door. It doesn't. If they have a search warrant, they're going to come in, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's your door. You don't have to answer it just because the cop's at the door. If you didn't call them, you don't have to answer it. Just ignore it.
Well, I wish I would have known that when I was a kid.
I know. It's amazing. You know, how many times have I opened the door or stood in the doorway and not even thought about how my rights were being violated, in the sense that they're watching what's going on in my home. You know, we try to be polite because that's what we were taught to be, and we make these mistakes that put our rights in jeopardy. Because if you sit and interact with these people, you've waived your rights. That's like if you're standing there and you continue to engage them, then they can continue to prod you, even if you said, you know, I don't consent to talk to you. Well, it's too late if you talk to them. It doesn't matter if they're talking to you about, well, what did you have for dinner last night? Well, you just started talking to them, and it's considered waiving your rights.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and let my kids know that. And that we don't have cops knocking at our doors, luckily, but you never know.
You never know. You're a prepper. You never know.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in, hon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, now, a lot of this, there's one other area that, you know, we have absolutely no First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights. And both Bush and Obama have done this. They've defined their powers too broadly. and claiming the authority to arrest and detain without charge or trial prisoners from around the globe who they deem are engaged in war on terror. And, you know, they can pick you up on the street and you can tell them, I want to talk to my lawyer. You can tell them, I'm not going to speak to you. You can tell them, you can't search my house. And if they deem you part of the war on terror, there is absolutely nothing you can do. I was watching a video the other night of a guy who was locked up for 111 days. Yep. Not able to call anybody, not able to do anything. So, you know, it's important that we try to regain those rights at some point. I don't think that's ever going to happen as long as Obama's still in office, or it may never happen again because we've allowed that opening. You know, in the matter of protecting ourselves because of 9/11, we all let it happen. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Now, there's some really important information here about private security. In my mind, I would think private security were police officers. They're not, and don't deem them that way. Currently, they outnumber police officers by 3-to-1 in the United States. As a result, whether you're shopping in the supermarket or pharmacy, or visiting a friend in the housing project, you're more likely to be confronted by a security guard than by a police officer. At the present time, the Fourth Amendment right does not apply to security. They can search you because they are non-government employees. For example, assume you're in the shopping mall and a security guard acting on a pure hunch searches a teenager's backpack. Inside the backpack, the guard finds a baggie containing an illegal drug. The guard can detain the teenager, call the police, and turn the drug over to the police officer. The drug is admissible in evidence because the search was conducted by a private security guard. Hopefully, as private security guards increasingly exercise traditional police functions, courts may one day apply the Fourth Amendment guidelines to their conduct. So please be extra careful when you're in a location where private security are about, because it is not the same. All right, I'm going to have G-Man drop in the link for states with stop and identify laws and flex your rights. This will help you determine whether or not you have to identify yourself. If you are not a state with a stop and identify law and they ask you for your ID, you do not have to give it to them. You have to simply say, am I being charged with something? You know, that you do not have to give it to them. And there's a link I'm going to be giving in a little bit that will help you understand how to do this in an appropriate way. So, all right. So, we've got, hang on a second. If you'd like to call into the show, while I get my thoughts about me, 347-202-0228. Looks like we have Half Prepper in the queue. Half Prepper, come on in.
Can you hear me?
I sure can.
I just wanted to say I agree with everything that you said. As I've been around quite a while, I've had the FBI at my house twice for incidents unrelated to prepping, and your advice is very good. If they show up with a warrant, which they did to me once, if they hand you a piece of paper, and they really knock hard when they come to your house, if they hand you a piece of paper, read it very carefully before you let them in. Because a lot of times they're kind of lazy. The warrant will be for a specific date and not really a specific time, but it'll say daylight hours only. And in my case, they woke me up at 5 o'clock in the morning to serve this warrant on me for a search warrant.
Wow.
So if they hand you a piece of paper, read it very carefully and do not talk to them. Immediately contact your attorney. Now, when you deal with the FBI, they're very educated. They're all college graduates at the FBI.
Yep.
So they're usually very polite when they deal with you. And not to say that they're not going to pull any sneaky tricks and try to entrap you and trying to get you to incriminate yourself, but they're very polite and they're very careful not to violate your rights. When you deal with regular police officers, that's an entirely different matter. So you have to be more on guard when you're dealing with the regular police. If there's something going on at the neighborhood and the cops knock on your door, don't answer the door. If you do answer the door, don't ever talk to them. Something silly like an illegal cable box on top of your television will get you a night in jail if the cop sees it.
Oh, exactly. You know, it's like, I think, you know, we forget that we don't have to open the door to anybody. It's our door.
There's a million YouTube videos where people sign search consents when they know they have stuff in their car, but they are adults and they signed it. You don't have to consent to searches. You should never consent to searches. You should always be polite to these guys. And cooperate as best you can within the law. There's a couple of YouTube channels. I think Jimmy Justice is one of them. He's an expert at filming the police out in public places, and he actually makes a video on how to do it properly. And you should never interfere with them when they're doing their jobs, because most of the people that were arrested were actually interfering with what was going down at the time.
Hey, do you mind if G-Man hops in here with us? He wants to.
No, absolutely.
All right. Come on, G-Man. Go ahead.
Hello, Half Prepper. Hey, great comment. Wow. Yeah, they have to. It has to be stated what they're there for, time, place. All of that information has to be there. And I'm watching my switchboard going crazy. We got other callers because I really had something on my mind that really pertained to this big time. I'm sorry. Half Prepper, keep going with your comment there. You got some good information. Bear, I'm going to catch another call.
Okay. Half Prepper, could you name that guy's videos again so I can type it in the chat room?
It's Jimmy Justice. He's in New York City, and he makes videos of the NYPD. And he usually, they're kind of silly. He gets, police cars that are parked on fire hydrants, and then he gets a good reactions out of some of the police officers and some of the traffic agents that we have in New York City. But he makes a video on how to do this without getting arrested. And the one thing that he stresses is don't ever interfere with what they're doing. Don't get in their space. Right. Film them from a distance. Let them do their job. And I think
that doesn't mean they're still not going to harass you. As we've seen,
true.
From other videos, they're still going to harass you. But they end up finding out pretty quick that as long as you know your rights and you stand by your rights, then they tend to back off after a little while.
Yes, and it's all about if you're polite and you're professional with these guys. And most, I mean, there's a few bad egg cops out there, but most cops that you deal with are very professional. They have a job to do, and they don't want to be there involved with this any more than you do. And if you cooperate with them, if you don't give them attitude, if you assert your rights in the proper way, your chances of success in the situation are going to grow greatly. If you are polite and professional, if you don't yell at them, if you don't lose their head, if you don't ask them if they have any better things to do other than writing you parking tickets, and so on and so forth.
Okay. So why did you open the door at 5 o'clock in the morning? Can I ask that?
Well, they came to my house with a search warrant. It was related to it's a long convoluted story, but they had a search warrant for my computer. They wanted to come and look at my computer. So they rang my doorbell and they really knocked hard on the door. And I didn't realize that it was the FBI with 6 federal agents standing out there. I thought it was my neighbor. I thought I maybe had somebody blocked in or something. And I lived in a condo complex where the neighbors are very close. They're right on top of you there. So I opened up the door, and I was half awake, one eye open, and there were 6 federal agents standing outside my door. They didn't have their guns out, but they had big vests and bulletproof vests, and they said FBI. And the guy had what's called his fold, his credentials, out in front of me to identify himself. And then even they had somebody in my backyard outside my balcony in case I was going to escape out the back or something. But once I let them in, they showed me they had a search warrant. The search warrant was valid for that day. It was not valid for the time that they showed up, but they came in and they were very professional once they came in. But they did ask me to talk to them. They did not have an arrest warrant, so they couldn't take me into custody. And so I refused to talk to them. I said, I'm not going to talk to you without having an attorney present.
Okay, and that's where I would like to jump in real quick, if I may, Bear. And that's a good point.
Go for it.
Well, and that's a good point, caller, that you're bringing up. And that is the number one problem that everybody, or almost everybody has, is they cannot keep their mouth shut. If you're in a situation and you're confronted by law enforcement or anybody, keep your mouth shut. Don't say a word, because anything you say will be used and will be twisted. I'll guarantee you it'll be twisted and used against you. You do not say a word. If you get pulled over for a DUI and you know you're a DUI, do not say a word. You get out, you walk back to their car, and you let them arrest you. Keep your mouth shut. You are not a lawyer. You do not know what you're doing, and they will get your butt. You got to keep your mouth shut, and that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Absolutely. I second and third that advice. Keep your mouth shut.
I think that's the biggest problem everybody has is they'll say that, I'm going to keep their mouth shut, and then they'll start chit-chatting. And it's like, they're not your buddies. They're not your friends. They're not there to help you because you didn't call them. If you called them, then they're there to help you. But otherwise, they're not there to help you. And yes, FBI can show up your house when you haven't done anything. And I can attest to that because they have showed up at my house many years ago, probably about 20 years ago now. And it wasn't anything I had done, but they were still at my house. So, they could be asking about your neighbors.
Absolutely. That goes on a lot. They're investigating somebody that's getting a security clearance or, simple, innocuous things like that where they're going to knock on the doors of the neighbors. And if you let these people into your house and you have something silly like an illegal cable box or if they see an AR-15 rifle, they're going to write a report about it. Now, they don't have if it's the FBI, they don't have the authority to arrest you for that per se, but they just call the cops and say, hey, I was at a house talking to this person and I saw an AR-15 rifle and you may want to take a ride over there.
There you go. Hey, do you mind? I want to keep you in because you're giving some great information. Do you mind if we have ZM come in?
Absolutely.
ZM, come on in. What's your question, hon?
Hey, I'm sorry, but I was just wondering about the security guard thing. If they check you and they find nothing, can you get something from them? Because technically you were found innocent and they didn't have you didn't show any proof that you had anything. So, I was just wondering if they should have to give you something for it, especially even police officers.
No, security guards are totally different entities. They can search you for no reason that I know of.
Especially in places like Nevada, they give security guards, which are not police officers, but every casino has a bunch of them. They give them a lot of authority because of the nature of the business out there. Other places like Walt Disney World, they have their own private police force. They're security guards, but they're actually sworn police officers. They've done all the state training. So different places will have different levels of security, and the officers themselves have different levels of authority depending on where you are.
Right. So they're not your friends, and they can do whatever they want. So be very careful about filming there. They can take your memory stick. They could, so be careful.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it's sad that any of us ever have to deal with that, but I think as times progress, and the way the world is going, I think a lot of us are going to be shocked at the things that are considered illegal that we do in the coming future.
Sure, they're vilifying this prepping. I mean, they're labeling us as terrorists in some cases. If you have more than a year's worth of food, you might be a terrorist. If you are hoarding rifles and ammunition, you might be a terrorist. And I think some of this gun control rhetoric that's coming down recently is related to us. They're going to target us because of what we believe in here, because we want to be ready for what's coming down for us.
And, you also, there's all the vets are already labeled as terrorists. And I know that a lot of my listeners are vets. And so,
absolutely.
I have been followed in the last 6 months and under some sort of surveillance. And the only thing I can think of is because of the information that I give out. And that was one of the reasons why doing this show was so important to me, because I am not afraid. I am a outspoken person, and I have nothing to hide, but I'm not afraid. And by doing this show, it solidifies the fact that I'm not afraid of them. I'm still going to teach people how to protect themselves, how to prepare for themselves, and how to protect their rights.
Well, it's a known fact that they've been showing up to prepper meetings. Agents from various agencies in the government have been undercover. They just send a guy to see what this prepper meeting is all about, or what PrepperCon is all about. And they're looking around, and they want to see if there's violations of any laws, because there are people out there that are preppers that do violate some minor laws, like the gentleman that they raided up in I forget what state he is, but they did. They found out that he was a felon, and they raided his prepper compound, and they did find some rifles that he was not supposed to have.
Right.
So that they are going to these meetings, and they are looking around. So you have to have your guard up. You have to beware. You have to know who's coming to your meetings.
Right, and you do. And I don't post our meetings. I try to eliminate the faces, but that doesn't mean that I don't take pictures of everyone there. I mean, come on, I got to protect my true preppers from whatever is going on. And I tend to I'll say it. We had one individual at one of our meetups that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were FEMA or FBI. I do believe it was FEMA person. And I made him feel as uncomfortable as I possibly could. And I finally took a picture of him with him looking at me. And he, within the next 3 minutes, got up and left. But there was no reason to bring it out in the sense of letting everybody know, because I did what I had to do to get rid of it.
Right.
And try to protect everybody. But it happens. I mean, it is what it is. They're afraid of us. They're afraid of the power that we are gaining, because we are gaining people in our communities at a rapid rate, because everybody's waking up.
Absolutely. People are waking up, and they're converting to preppers all the time. I mean, there's all levels of prepping, from, the guy who's just buying an extra quart of milk, to get through a weekend, to, people that are stockpiling, several months' worth of food.
There you go. Well, thank you so much for calling in. And if you will hang on the line, G-Man would like to talk to you before you hang up.
Sure, you're absolutely welcome. Thank you.
Okay, folks. So I know I'm running a little short, but if you just give me about 3 minutes, I'll go ahead and finish, because I think what I've got to finish with is real important. Okay, so before I close, I want to go over one more time the key phrases you should learn to memory. Officer, I understand you're just trying to do your job, but I do not consent to searches. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? And, G-Man, if you'll post that last, I'll post it, because I think you're talking to half. Let me see if I can post it for you guys. And this is a really good video on successful police interactions. Okay, I don't want to talk to you. You'll have to speak to my lawyer. Officer, I have a right to be here. I'm filming for documentation purposes and not interfering with your work. I am turning the camera off under protest. So my closing quote tonight was going to be a quote from John Adams, but one of my YouTube friends, Wheatree, sent me this, and I think it says what I hope and wish for all of you for the coming year better than I could ever dream to do it. Here is your daily survival kit to help you each day. A toothpick to remind you to pick the good qualities in everyone, including yourself. A rubber band to remind you to be flexible. Things might not always go the way you want, but it can be worked out. A Band-Aid to remind you to heal hurt feelings, either yours or someone else's. An eraser to remind you everyone makes mistakes. That's okay, we learn by our errors. Candy kiss to remind you everyone needs a hug or a compliment every day. Mint to remind you that you're worth a mint to your family and me. Bubble gum to remind you to stick with it and you can accomplish anything. A pencil to remind you to list your blessings every day. A tea bag to remind you to take time to relax daily and go over that list of blessings. This is what makes life worth living every minute, every day. Wishing you love, gratitude, friends to cherish, caring, sharing, laughter, music, and warm feelings in your heart in the year 2013. Join me on Tuesday, January 8th at 8 p.m. Central Time. If you do nothing else, what are the minimum items you should have in your food storage? I will go over my list of must-haves for food storage. Hopefully, you'll tell me what your top 10 are. We'll devote the time to basic food preparations for the new prepper in question. So come share your knowledge with those just starting out and tell us what your must-haves are. For now, you can find more from me on YouTube and on Facebook, also here every Tuesday on PrepperBroadcasting.com. Thank you for spending your valuable time with me. Good night and blessings.